Hello.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Okay, we are on YouTube.
Okay, well, it's 5:33, and I'd like to call to order the special working session of the Oregon City Library Board. I don't know what formality do we need to announce who's attending and whatnot.
Yeah, I would just take a roll.
All right.
And yep.
Attending is Larry Osborne, Elizabeth Tintner, Nick Dickerman, Cynthia Andrews, and Heidi Blackwell, and myself, David Goldberg, plus Greg Williams and Denise Butcher. So the purpose of this meeting was to review and to start work on what changes we would like to suggest and then approve of in the strategic plan. In anticipation of this, I spent some time rereading the plan several times, and I'd like to take a few minutes to share some thoughts, because some of you were here and participated in the development of the last one. I was not, and I know several others were not. I don't know, I think most of you know, or some of you know, that for roughly 25 years, my role with large medical groups, hospitals, and government health agencies around the world was to develop strategic plans. So this is a world I'm pretty familiar with. I probably facilitated 300 or so strategic plan development for large organizations. And so I've been around this in terms of what has worked, and some organizations I work with over a period of 20 years. And so I've seen sort of the implementation of them and what works and what doesn't. And so I'd like to just provide a few thoughts about the current strategic plan of the library, the 2019-24 plan, just from my perspective, having worked with strategic plans. And then I'd like to open it up to discussion, because some of what I'm going to say may be a little provocative. I have a couple of concerns about this plan. I think that an incredible amount of work and time and good thoughts and energy went into the development of this plan. And I think by and large, the meat of the plan is quite good. But I have two real issues with it. The first is that I find the first section with all of the mission, vision, core values, guiding principles, etc., incredibly verbose, and as a result, almost impossible to sort of make sense out of for me. And my suggestion is that we take what is the mission statement and make it the vision statement for the library. And we can go over that when we get to that. And that we further consider keeping the core values as they are and nothing else. I mean, get rid of the guiding principles piece, get rid of the vision piece, because I just think it muddles up the beginning. I think it's very clear and very distinct, and I think very well put, both the core principles and the issue that I raised. The other part that I had difficulty with was the granularity of it as you got into the meat of we've got to separate what is the board's responsibility and what staff's responsibility. And it seems to me in a strategic plan, it's the board's position to sort of define the organization, redefine it if need be, set the core vision and values for the organization, and then lay out some strategic focus, foci or strategic for the organization. I think that is pretty well done here. I mean, I think those 5 areas, whether they are currently the right 5 areas, I think is what we need to work on. I would not get more than 5, because I think nothing will ever get done if there's more than 5. But I do believe that good work went into that. From that, it seems to me that the board's responsibility is then to set some expectations or objectives for each one of those 5 foci, strategic foci. And those would be fairly broad. And then to turn it over to the staff and to say, now you work out the plan, the details, the action plan in order to meet these objectives. And then we hold Greg and Denise and the staff accountable and responsible for delivering on that and for explaining to us as representatives of the community how what they did improved the objective. And it seems to me that makes it very much clearer as to sort of what the role of the board is and the role of staff. Further, this is an unusual organization. in that we are not the board, the independent fiduciary board of a freestanding library. If we were, we'd have all sorts of other requirements on us, frankly, mainly fiduciary responsibility to make sure that everything was spent in the right way and that it was audited properly and that policies and procedures were followed in terms of human resources and discrimination and all sorts of issues like that. That is not our role in this case. You know, we have a city, basically the library is a department of the city. And consequently, in many ways, a lot of the responsibility that a board would normally have is really taken over by the city and by the commission, and then the people that they hire to manage the library. And so we've got, in many ways, some of the things that I found in this plan really are just routine sort of responsibilities of running an organization that we are very well covered for, because we not only have professional leadership that knows what they're doing, but they have people that are watching them and auditing them and following procedures and recommending things, and lawyers and accountants and all the various accoutrements that we would have to have hired independently had this been an individual or an independent organization. And so those are my opening thoughts, and I thought I would lay them out. I had intended to send them to you, but because of public meeting law, I couldn't do that because of the nature of the content that would have to be done in a public setting. And so hence, I'm dropping it on you now. I met with Greg and Denise yesterday, and we went through some of this, and I'm sure they'll share some of their thoughts about it, but they were somewhat in agreement with my orientation to this. And so I'm a little hesitant to ask the board to sort of walk through each one of these pieces in order to, you know, of the existing plan, because I think it needs more than just tweaking of pieces. I think it needs a real review, and I think that can be done much better with a smaller group, probably a couple of board members and Denise and Greg, to take what we have now and to refine it somewhat, and then to ask the staff to come back to us in 3 months or so with a set of activities and a process in order to deliver what we, the board, are suggesting. So that's my soapbox for the night. But I just didn't want us to get into the nits and gnats of this thing before we really agreed on sort of the approach. So with that, I will, please.
David, thank you for your thoughtful remarks. I wasn't here on the board when this plan was created, and I'm very impressed with the obvious thought and care that went into this. But I agree with your remarks. I've had a lot of experience, you know, at the educational level in developing strategic plans. And as I went through this document a couple of times, I kept getting bogged down with its structure, in that it felt to me that there was a lot of intermixing of strategic planning and operational planning.
Yes, indeed.
And that operational planning was fine. And I was really happy to see that a number of the goals had been met. But as I went through it and I made my own, you know, marks and remarks a couple of times, I just thought, wow, the issue here is sort of the structure of the document. It's certainly not about the ideas or the goals or the thought and care that went into that, but the structure of the document itself doesn't serve strategic planning as well as it might. Okay, and that doesn't mean that I want or suggest that we throw out, you know, all of the ideas that are embedded in here. Obviously, you know, Greg and crew have gone through and eliminated a lot of things already, but I would support, you know, David's idea that maybe we start looking at sort of the structure of the document itself, as opposed to all of the details that we tended to get sort of bogged down with. And again, not remarking on those details at all, but it just seems like maybe it's really two documents, and maybe what we really need to do is pull out what is the emerging strategic, really strategic plan, and then have the staff consider what the details are that make that strategic plan operational.
Yeah, great.
There's a real mixture of strategy and tactics in here that doesn't really work.
Now, Nick, you and Oz, you were there during the development. Is that right?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I really want to honor that work because I really think the document has probably 90% of what we're going to need in terms of getting it organized slightly differently. So I mean,
Well, I mean, I definitely don't agree with everything that you said, but
Sure.
that's just my opinion. But
no, that's good.
part of it, when we were doing a strategic plan and we were looking at the planning that was being done, I mean, the format of it was really, that was gotten from someplace, from another. We didn't. It wasn't started from scratch. It was really, an approach that was used that was pretty much framed up. But we are also looking at the Riverwalk project and some of the things that they were doing with guiding principles and those types of things. So we felt that was something that was within the city itself, and that other people, obviously, if that was a huge effort that was going on sort of along that time. And so I know that we looked at that, and I can't remember. And Greg, I think there's something like the mission is posted someplace in the library. Is it mission or? I'm trying to recall which one of those it was, but we basically just copied that because that was already defined, and everyone agreed that was still good. And I think, like I said, it was something that was really posted at the library. And I understand what you're saying in terms of strategy versus tactic and operational. And I think part of it was that we thought that there were things that, since this was something that the public would have access to, that we wanted to really stress that the library was really focusing on some of those areas. And a lot of those probably are the ones that you look at it as being operational. But it was almost more of the document was also being used to emphasize the fact that the library didn't forget those things, even though they're embedded in the operation of the library. But it was thought that this would be more of a communication tool. And then thirdly, around the fiduciary responsibility, I feel very strongly that we have a huge fiduciary responsibility. These are taxpayer monies that are coming through the library district and given to us. And the board is really the ones that we should be doing that. We should be, at least at a high level, doing oversight and making sure that those dollars are being spent the most appropriate way. And I can tell you, when I'm on LDAC, I emphasize the fact that our board is in agreement with how we're spending those dollars. So I don't want to, I don't want to diminish that. I think we have a big fiduciary responsibility. And that, I'll end at that.
I think there's go ahead.
No, I was inviting you. I thought you were going to say something.
Well, just that I have to admit, I sort of abrogated my responsibility about the third meeting we had because it became obvious to me that the discussion was primarily a health relations effort rather than what I would call a serious attempt to develop the strategy for the library, in that many things in the library we knew what had to be done. And the idea was to get a group agreement on that. And the way it was done was to bring in lots of different people, which is a great thing. But from the standpoint of strategy, I don't think it was particularly effective.
Well, it may,
You're muted. Cynthia, you're muted.
it may have been effective, and probably was effective, for the time and the environment in which the document was created. Okay, I mean, people in the community had just supported a huge library, remodel effort, and there was, I mean, I wasn't there, but from a community perspective, I can speak that there was the real attempt in this document to make sure that the library and its operations and planning was accountable to the community for all the money and support that it had given. And
I think it was
so,
successful in that.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. The document was successful in the context in which it was created and the underlying, one of the underlying purposes for which it was created. But I think now we're in a different environment, and the document was created to be a living document. So I think we have to respond to both internal and external changes to make a change in the scope and purpose of the document. It certainly doesn't, minimize in any way all the work, ideas, and sincere, effort to be both transparent and accountable that this document originally represented. And I think we have to, celebrate that work, but it's a different environment now.
So the changes that are currently on the document, that was done by the staff, or that was done by, so that's there.
That was done, but yeah, that was our attempt to kind of, based on some of the brief discussions we had had last time about trying to, my hope that some of these operational things would not be included in the strategic plan, because a lot of it's just kind of routine day-to-day stuff that we do. Like a good example was displays, putting up displays in the library. I think there's 2 or 3 initiatives in there about putting up displays in the library, and I kind of felt like, well, that's just that's part of our daily routine. So I didn't want to have to put it in the plan. I feel strongly that anything that's in this plan, I have to report on it. I have to collect data on it. I want to communicate back to the board, the commission, the community, here's the progress that we've made. Here's everything that we're doing. And it's really hard sometimes to communicate effectively about just kind of these routine things that you do. So my goal was to kind of take some of those routine things out of there, rephrase some of them, which just looking at the way they were phrased and what the intent I thought was behind them, I thought there was something to be phrased a little more clearly and a little more on target with what they were trying to achieve. So yeah, but it was our staff attempt to kind of go through a first pass and just say, if we were going to stick with this, here's what we could report on. Here's what we kind of think rises to the level of being really strategic things that if we don't do, we're doing something wrong with the direction of the library. And the rest of it was just kind of either stuff that had already been done by the time the plan was put together, or just that routine stuff that I personally didn't feel got elevated to the level of being in a strategic plan.
Well, I went through this line by line and was, I agreed with all the changes that were made in terms of the language involved, because it in almost every case it clarified greatly what the intent was. But there were maybe 3 places, 2, possibly 3 places where line outs were occurring that I actually wrote keep this one. But that was about it. I thought it was an excellent job on your part, Greg.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna chime in. As I was reading through it, I felt like there was more clarity new in reading it. It felt a little bit more streamlined, I guess, where the ideas and there was a couple places where you kept the original ideas because they're wonderful ideas, but they were phrased in a few different places in the same way. And so kind of streamlining that for me, who I have a short attention span, it was nice to be able to kind of get to the point, just because, I didn't read through the entire document, but I did, my best as I was chasing the 2-year-old around and I felt like get through it more than the other one reading, back and forth. So I did appreciate the edits seemed to be clear and the success measures. That's something that I'm kind of a stickler on, is a success measure. It needs to be, we call them SMARTY goals in my field, and having those are really important, that you can measure and report on them, as you said. And so I haven't read through all of them. That's kind of where my eyes went, was to see, like, is this a SMARTY goal? Are we, is it individualized, time bound, all of those things? And I felt like that there were really good goals before. I mean, there was numbers attached to them. And I think that the updates maintain that integrity of being really SMART goals.
I just want to stress that I'm not disagreeing with what Greg recommended for the changes. I'm just saying what the framework was that we were working under at that point in time. And I think I think there's probably the one that I will continue to go back to is that we have fiduciary responsibility. And for me, I don't know if I can, if I'm sitting on LDAC and maybe somebody else wants to do it, but I don't feel comfortable if the board is not agreeing that we are spending the money the right way.
Oh,
And that we are that we're doing the oversight, because I look at it again being very critical from that standpoint. But the other aspects of it, I'm fine with it. Matter of fact, I remember, I've done a lot of strategic plans also over the years, and some at the corporate level, and some at the I was responsible for information technology at several hospital systems. And we did a strategic plan, and then we did a tactical plan, and that the whole aspect of a tactical plan was also part of the discussion. That next layer never really worked, but the tactical plan is where you take it and where the rubber really meets the road, and you're pulling out projects that you want to complete. Some of those will not necessarily be done in a calendar year or a fiscal year, but you want to make sure that they get carried to completion. And that's what I was at the time. I was trying to stress that that would be the ideal, would be to have a tactical plan in addition to the strategic plan. And I don't know how there probably are other ways of communicating. I know we're doing a fine job with the things that I really look out at in terms of what's happening in the environment, in our environment, in our local environment, and also the state, national. But with all the emphasis on racial equality and the things that we're doing along those lines, I think we're doing a great job. And I don't know, I just think it's important for us to be able to communicate that to our community members, and for us to be behind it as a board.
Nick, I want to be clear about something. I was not saying that we don't have fiduciary responsibility. We clearly do as in an advisory capacity. But really, the fiduciary liability lies with the city. And that's somewhat different than being in an independent organization. And indeed, we are responsible for being sure that the budget makes sense and that the money is being spent correctly. And if we have any concerns about that, to raise them certainly in the board and with the staff, but even higher if in fact we think there's something funny going on. So I agree that we certainly are in the line of the fiduciary responsibility. It just doesn't end with us.
I agree. I'm not disagreeing with that.
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing with that. But I think we are different than all the we're an advisory committee, but I feel like we have more responsibility, and that's what we're called, a board as opposed to a committee.
Yeah, I think that's.
And I just want to say I agree with Nick. Especially for the newer people, I want everybody to know I firmly agree. I want the library board to have transparency about the dollars, because quite honestly, you're our best advocates in the community when there are problems, budgetarily. So I feel a strong responsibility to make sure that everybody has the data that they need, that they understand how our library is funded, what some of the concerns are. We put some effort into making sure the board gets that information, and we can do a better job in the future. But I completely agree. I would not be comfortable with a board that did not have that, fiduciary, mindset and looking at those things. So I wanted to get out there and say that. I want to make sure everybody knows that I'm 100% on board with that. So.
Well, what I'd like to suggest, and part of this came out of the meeting yesterday with Greg and Denise, is that we have a small working group, because a committee rewriting a plan, it doesn't work. And that I'd like to take some responsibility and maybe have one other board member work with Denise and Greg and I to sort of redraft this using the core of what's there, really not inventing new stuff. Most of it is restructuring and putting together, and then coming back to the board with the draft saying, this is what we suggest, and then getting feedback, and then ultimately approving a revision. The outside environment has changed a little bit since this thing was written. And so it's probably a healthy time to do that regardless of what had happened, of where we are, what had happened before. So if folks are comfortable with that, I'd certainly like to ask for a volunteer to do that, it'll take some, some work outside of board meetings, obviously. And to do it really over the next couple of months at the most.
I'd be interested in helping, David, if you think that's appropriate, but if someone else feels very strongly about participating, I would yield to that.
Anybody jumping?
I'm not volunteering. But I for this specific job. But what I feel is important is the input from those stakeholders before you can say that you're, have met a goal or that you're rewriting a goal, to have actual, information from families, from teachers, from those different groups in the community, because I think that's, we're representative of who we are, but that doesn't necessarily reach all the different groups. So
I agree with that. That was one of the key things we talked about yesterday.
And that's what I'd be willing to help with, is making some connections with other groups to get the input.
And that's an important role for us as a board to do that. So,
Yeah.
Heidi, you really identified a key role for us as a board. I mean, as Nick emphasized the fiduciary role, I think Heidi has really said it well, that we have a responsibility to the stakeholder groups. And, the plan needs to reflect how that's going to happen.
Anything else then? I really don't want to have meetings just to have meetings. So what I'd suggest is that that we adjourn this and that we'll convene with the four of us to begin this process, and we'll keep the board informed, throughout. And that at the next board meeting, we'll have the beginning draft of the work. Does that make sense?
It not only makes sense, I think it's the greatest idea I've heard come out of a board or committee in a long time.
That's high praise indeed, Oz. So
I'll say.
wow.
Well, different times call for different things from boards.
Yeah.
Right.
I think all of us probably belong to other organizations, other boards, churches and school groups and, work-related groups. And I think all of those groups are finding that the guiding boards or leadership are being challenged by a significantly changed external environment. So I think this is not a bad thing. This is just saying, okay, we recognize as a board that we may have to have a more active, a more dynamic role in what happens than we have had in the past, when things just sort of went along pleasantly without much need for real dynamism from us. But that may be a changing picture for all boards.
Yeah, no, and that's the way I want. I mean, I've said it before, we look to you as the designated representatives of our community, the people that we serve, and your input and your support and your participation in everything we do is so important. So I really appreciate having an involved, engaged board and working with everybody, collaborating. So this is great. I'm very pleased. So I've been trying not to say anything because I'm so happy.
It's very hard for you.
It really is. It's a challenge. So.
Well,
Go
I
ahead.
want to reiterate my support for the work that went into this document.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And the ideas and the staff time and, board time that went into the document. And it's a great springboard and foundation for the work that we need to do next. And so, again, just because we redlined a lot of things or are, questioning the structure or whatever, doesn't diminish that work at all. It's very important work, to have laid the foundation for what needs to happen next.
Well, it's certainly going to make what's next a lot easier.
Mhm.
I just want to, I want to stress that I'm not opposed to anything that you're.
No, I didn't think you were.
Okay, I just want to make that clear. I was just trying to give you the background that how it.
I had a question about this. Nick, you were around when this was created. And Denise,
Yes.
was this the first time the library had a fully fleshed out strategic plan? No?
No. I remember when I was interviewing for the board, I went to the website and read the strategic plan. So we definitely had one then.
We
Okay.
did. It mostly focused on getting a new building.
Mhm.
So once we got the building, the strategic plan we were done with, and it was time to write a new one. So, yeah.
Denise, I shows my memory here. We had a consultant help us on this, didn't we?
We had an employee from the state library that helped us, Darcy Hanning.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. And we followed a specific format that they use.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't think it wasn't, I think we were trying to follow what was accepted, what we thought would be acceptable. But I think that, you know, the things that you're talking about in terms of operations and some of those kind of things. And, you know, I totally understand that. I think we need to come up with some other ways to making sure that we communicate that those things are still being, some of those things are still being emphasized within the library. And I know that they're routinely being done, but I think it's good for the community to understand that also.
Yeah.
100% agree. Yeah.
Yeah, we use
absolutely.
this strategic planning for results from PLA.
Any other comments or?
I just have to say, David, when you said that, you know, the world has changed, you know, since this was originally done, I think that was the understatement of the year right there. So.
I mean, I'm involved with another program that they're talking about whether we could be in person a month from now, and nobody knows. I mean, there's just
Yep.
no clarity as to, you know, what is possible a month from now.
That actually, before we adjourn, I would like to ask that question of everybody about in-person versus online meetings, just to take everybody's temperature. So, but we can do that at the very end, unless.
You can do it now.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I before we ended, I did want to make sure and take everybody's temperature. The city has started to do some in-person meetings of various boards and committees. I want to find out your comfort level with doing that. I will be perfectly honest and say I'm very happy to do online at the moment. It does not cause me any problem, and I'm certain that if that was the direction of the library board to continue meeting, you know, online, that would not be a problem. But if there are people who feel, you know, that it's time to start doing some in-person meetings, I would love to have that discussion. But I want to make sure everybody's on board with how we're continuing to go forward.
I don't necessarily have an opinion on online versus in person, other than I would like opportunity to meet and spend time with people, and I feel like in person that's much easier. So I would like to move towards in person in some way.
My suggestion is, I think we have to wait. I mean, I just think we have to, I mean, at this point, there's mask requirements inside and outside. You know, our ICUs are still filling up. And my perception is that it's still a little bit too soon, and that, yes, we want to do that in person. I would like nothing better than to sit around a room and around a table and deal with these issues. But I think it's a little dangerous still.
I agree with that, and just having a young child who can't be vaccinated.
Right.
I'm trying to decrease my risk of care. I am, you know, but I don't want to carry anything to him. And so as much as I can minimize that risk for my family, I would prefer to wait. I want to be in person, but just looking at the numbers right now and the hospital numbers and the mandates, I think we have to be really responsible with our choice on this. And for me, I feel like right now online is a better choice for me and my family.
Yeah.
I have two comments. Number one is, I think from a Zoom meeting standpoint and getting input from everybody, this is one of the most dynamic groups I'm involved with.
Okay.
And I think that is a big part of being in person and being, you know, that dynamic of having those kind of discussions. And I just feel like this is a really good group that is willing to stand up and talk. I'm involved in some other things and some are in leadership roles, and it's so frustrating because people will not, you know, participate. And I guess I'm thinking it might be better in person. And then the other thing is, Greg, is there any opportunity for hybrid?
There is, yeah. I mean, we could start doing the legislature recently passed, there's a new statute that basically all public meetings have to offer some form of hybrid, some sort of remote attendance opportunity. So we can do that in the city hall chambers. So yes, that's a possibility.
I mean, I think with the situation where it is right now and everyone, and I think there are individuals that have different considerations, that hybrid is still something to be considered. And, I think that maybe it's migrating towards in person. I don't know.
Well, I'd like to suggest that we're going to hold off any final decision here, and that this is a moving target. It seems
Okay.
like, I mean, I've been looking at several communities in terms of the epidemiologic numbers and the ICU bed numbers and the age of the people that are entering hospitals, and
Yeah.
what's happening as schools start opening again and all those kids start interacting, masked and maskless. And I just think we don't know where we are yet. And my background is also in epidemiology, and I've been predicting a very tough winter for a while. So I just think we have to be cautious, and I certainly don't want to put anybody at risk. And
Are we okay then, like, for whatever meeting we end up having in October, if we say that at the moment the plan would be to do it online, and we can revisit? I basically just want to revisit it every meeting and kind of take the temperature and kind of look at everything. Does that work for everybody?
I think so.
Sounds good to me.
okay, all right, good.
Okay, great.
Okay. Anything else that anybody wants to raise?
I just want to plug the OC 2040 meeting. I know Greg has sent it out. I'm on that team as well. It's, a vision on where we want Oregon City to be in 2040, and it can inform some of this conversations with the strategic plan, but it really does show a group working together on where we'd like to see Oregon City. So if you can take part in any of those meetings, please do.
I agree. All right. Well, with that, I'd like to adjourn our work session at 6:10 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
everybody.
so much, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Here, get some sleep, Nick.
Yeah.
Okay.